massive green slush funds of taxpayer dollars have lined the pockets of some of America's most powerful elites. Welcome to America Uncovered. I'm Chris Chappell. Close your eyes for a moment and go back in history with me to a time long, long ago. To the 2024 election. Trump just won and government officials are scrambling. They know the era of Biden and Harris is over. They also know that Trump can completely undo everything they put in place, and time's a-ticking. So they set up a $20 billion slush fund, paid by you, the American taxpayer, to progressive nonprofits. You see, back in 2022, the Biden administration created the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, also known as the Green Bank Initiative. It's a $27 billion program overseen by the Environmental Protection Agency as part of Biden's $740 billion Inflation Reduction Act, which totally reduced inflation. The media said so. You can always trust the media. Okay, maybe not. But that's okay, because inflation is a good thing. The media said so. You can always trust the media. Man, I can't imagine why Trump won. The Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund was advertised as a way to provide financing for clean energy technology projects nationwide, delivering lower energy costs and bringing both clean technology and economic revitalization, particularly to low-income and disadvantaged communities. The money from the fund was split, with $20 billion directed to financing. Here's how it was supposed to work. $20 billion would be given to nonprofit lenders. They would act as banks for clean energy projects, giving out low-interest loans, getting interest payments back on those projects, which then fund the cycle forever. Sounds great, as long as you don't ask any questions, but questions were asked. Back in January 2024, suspicious Republicans on the House Committee on Energy and Commerce had a top Biden EPA official testify about what they called Biden's Green Bank giveaway, which sounds like a game show hosted by Howie Mandel. They asked things like, how will these nonprofits determine which projects to finance? What are the qualifications of their staff? How will the EPA monitor the projects once the money goes out the door? And how will the agency maintain accountability? What happens if the money is not used as directed? Did certain groups or individuals have priority access or input in designing these programs? And did they gain unfair advantages in the competitions? What happens when projects fail? Why do kids love the taste of Cinnamon Toast Crunch? I suffered through that boring testimony, and TLDR, Biden's EPA said nonprofits would be held accountable and that the application process would be vigorous. Nothing to worry about. They even provided this as a source. Well, nearly 1 year later, and guess what? None of the money was transferred out of the federal government until after Trump won the election. Biden EPA officials rushed to get the $20 billion into progressive nonprofits before Trump could take office and stop it.
Now we're just having to get the money out as fast as possible before they come in and fuck up. It truly feels like we're on the Titanic and we're throwing gold bars off the hatch. We gave them the money because it was harder. If it was a government-run program, they could take the money away. If Trump won, and because it was a insurance policy against Trump winning.
Yep, nothing says rigorous application process and accountability like equating it to throwing jewels overboard. Who was in charge? That old lady from the Titanic? By the way, that video taken by Project Veritas got the attention of Trump's EPA administrator, Lee Zeldin.
Shockingly, roughly $20 billion of your tax dollars were parked at an outside financial institution by the Biden EPA. This scheme was the first of its kind in EPA history, and it was purposefully designed to obligate all of the money in a rush job with reduced oversight. Even further, this pot of $20 billion was awarded to just 8 entities that were then responsible for doling out your money to NGOs and others at their discretion with far less transparency.
Ironic that an environmental program was less transparent than the air over Beijing. So, $20 billion divided between 8 nonprofits. Who were these nonprofits being entrusted with billions of taxpayer dollars? That's what Zeldin wanted to find out. First, he attempted to freeze the $20 billion, but $3.1 billion had already made it out. So, Zeldin's acting deputy administrator sent a letter to the 8 nonprofits in question asking for things like a breakdown of spending, project details, subrecipients, compliance measures, income, and more. Trump's FBI is now also joining the probe, but there's massive pushback. I know, shocking. Trump's ideas are always so universally beloved and accepted. A top Justice Department prosecutor, Denise Chung, quit after refusing to begin the process of freezing the assets. Democrats on the Senate Committee on Environment and Public Works pushed back as well, saying that Zeldin is manipulating facts as a pretext to terminate an already obligated, congressionally authorized program that would lower household energy costs, spur economic development, and reduce pollution, warning that taking back the grant money would destroy thousands of jobs and harm hundreds of communities across the country, and demanded that funding proceed. Unsurprisingly, the mainstream media also criticized the freeze. According to Newsweek, Zeldin's freeze is strikingly illegal. According to the Washington Post, the steps Trump took had no adequate evidence or legal basis. They were a misuse of the DOJ's criminal investigation powers. The government's attempt to prevent the release of billions of dollars in grants was extraordinary and probably unprecedented. But there are things about those 8 nonprofits that are also extraordinary and probably unprecedented. Several were created in August 2023, just a month after grant applications went live. As the Free Press puts it, when it became clear that large 9- and 10-figure grants would be up for grabs. Not only that, the boards and staff of these 8 groups include Democratic donors, people with connections to the Obama and Biden administrations, and prominent Democrats like Stacey Abrams. These were some of the biggest grants to individual organizations in American history. Trump's EPA now believes that many of these organizations were created out of thin air for the purpose of receiving these funds. I've been to outdoor seafood markets in the summer that smelled less fishy than this. The biggest of these groups is Climate United. Before the freeze, it was awarded $6.9 billion of the 20. And it didn't exist before that $20 billion was up for grabs. It was formed from a coalition of 3 smaller nonprofits. All the higher-ups in Climate United were bigwigs in the Obama and Biden administration and prominent Democrats. And here's an interesting piece. One of the 3 groups that formed Climate United is Community Preservation Corporation. It got $2.4 billion of Climate United's haul. It says it will use that money to finance carbon-reducing improvement to multifamily housing nationwide. But before the $20 billion of the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund existed, it described its mission as financing for affordable housing projects. Sounds like it was doing something entirely different before, how shall I say it? Its interest in green projects? The next biggest of the 8 nonprofits is the Coalition for Green Capital. It got $5 billion. The weird thing is, in 2023, before this whole Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund existed, its total expenditures for the year was a little over $2 million. That's small time. Why would you think they would be able to handle billions of dollars well? Someone must have had a lot of faith in them. Maybe someone like its former policy director, Joey Wise, who left the post to oversee the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund. The current CEO of Coalition for Green Capital is Richard Kaufman. The Daily Caller News Foundation discovered he's donated more than $600,000 to Democrats since 2020, was an advisor to the Obama administration, worked as Andrew Cuomo's energy czar, and was in the running to be Kamala Harris's energy secretary if she won the election. There are other interesting connections, but for the sake of time, I'll move on. Power Forward Communities was granted $2 billion. It didn't exist before 2023. Got started just after Biden announced the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund application period. It was also made up of smaller nonprofits, all with well-connected Democratic staff. I'm going to stop there because that's basically the pattern. None of these groups had ever managed anything even approaching the billions of dollars awarded. So the whole idea that this would become some profitable, self-sustaining business cycle is absurd. The EPA believes that everything involving the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund was designed to weaken EPA oversight.
They designed this program to distribute the $20 billion to limit the government's oversight, tying the hands behind the back of the EPA. So if you asked me where all this money is going, I actually don't know. And it was designed that way.
The $20 billion was meant to flow to these well-connected groups, and that was the end of it. No accountability, no oversight, no way of telling if any of the money was actually doing what it was supposed to do. But at least Zeldin stopped it though, right? Well, even though most of the $20 billion was frozen, the EPA considers the funds to have been expended since the money no longer resides with the agency. And as I said, there's a lot of legal challenges to the funding freeze. And even as Zeldin tries to claw the money back, according to a source speaking to the Free Press, the contracts with the 8 groups contain a trigger clause that will cause the money to be immediately released if the Trump administration attempts to recoup it. For a program meant to reduce greenhouse gas, it was all just a bunch of hot air, made up by burning taxpayer money. Your money. Now I know I just spent the last 10 minutes talking about how the government is wasting your ever-dwindling reserve of money, but making this show isn't easy. So if you can, please support us by subscribing to our new premium website, AmericaUncovered.tv. Other crowdfunding platforms like Patreon take a big cut, so this is the best way to support the show. Just click this button. Once again, I'm Chris Chappell. Thank you for watching America Uncovered.